Hello, everybody. I'm Catherine Holt. I'm the CEO of the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce, and I'm very pleased today to be joined by Minister Mona Fortier, and Minister Fortier is the Minister of Middle Class Prosperity and Associate Minister of Finance for the federal government. Welcome, Mona.
Thank you.
Very, very pleased that you could join us. The federal government has been extremely pivotal every day in our lives during this pandemic. And I just want to recall before I hand over the floor for your opening remarks that we met here in Victoria when you came to acquaint yourself with local business on March 4th. And we had a very different conversation. At that point, it was all about our issues with regard to being a booming economy and prices being too high and labor being too short. And within a very short period of time, we have found ourselves in this circumstance. So thank you for joining us. And we are going to spend some time today talking about what the federal government is involved in currently and may have coming down the road for businesses. But first, let me hand it over to you to make some opening remarks.
Well, thank you very much for having me today. Hello, everyone. Merci beaucoup de m'avoir invité aujourd'hui. And Catherine, I want to thank you for hosting this live event and for our call earlier this month, and also for the fact that we saw each other just a month ago. And I was very happy to be in Victoria for that roundtable. We were there together on quality of life issues and talking about well-being with Mayor Lisa Helps and leaders from many sectors in the city. And, you know, it is a very trying times right now. And it is incredible to think that how much conversations, as you just said, has changed in such a short time. I would like also to start by saying that we know that due to the severe impacts this pandemic is causing, businesses need help to keep more workers employed, so that Canadians can keep up with their bills. And the approach that we have taken to respond to this unprecedented crisis has been based on 3 steps. Firstly, we are ensuring that the health and safety of Canadians is at the heart of everything that we are doing. Secondly, we are working to ensure everyone is protected, nobody falls through the cracks. And lastly, we are putting in place measures to address the needs and to find solutions for all Canadians. And this is why over the last 3 weeks, I have personally engaged with the stakeholders across British Columbia and Victoria, including Mayor Helps, the Business Council of British Columbia, the BC Chamber of Commerce, to help respond to the needs of British Columbians and its businesses. And thanks to everyone's hard work, we were able to put in place a series of broad economy-wide supports as part of Canada's COVID-19 economic response plan. Je suis certaine que vous conviendrez tous que nous nous trouvons dans une période de crise sans précédent, alors que nous luttons contre les impacts sanitaires, sociaux et économiques de la pandémie de la COVID-19. Nous sommes donc très conscients que les entreprises canadiennes et leurs travailleurs souffrent depuis le début de cette période difficile et que tous les secteurs de l'économie continuent d'être touchés par la COVID-19. Nous agissons très vite pour aider le plus de Canadiens possible et le plus rapidement possible. Through COVID-19 plan, we're providing more than $100 in direct support, $85 billion in lift support through income tax, GST, and customs duty payment deferrals, and over $570 billion in additional credit and liquidity support. Additionally, this week, millions of Canadians began applying for the new Canada Emergency Response Benefit, or CERB, for those who listen to those acronyms, which was set up to make sure Canadians can afford to put food on the table, pay for housing, and necessary medicine. This benefit provides $2,000 a month for up to 4 months to workers who lose their income as a result of the pandemic. To make it as flexible and accessible as possible, the benefit is available to workers whether or not they are eligible for employment insurance. And this important measure was put in place to help millions of Canadians impacted by the pandemic financially. The program rollout started last Monday, and we have seen millions of Canadians apply for it. And we will continue to do whatever it takes to make sure that Canadians in different situations have the right support. Furthermore, to help businesses keep their employees or hire them back to help them prepare for recovery, we also proposed a subsidy for qualifying business. The Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy would apply at a rate of 75% for the first $58,700 normally earned by employees, which represents a benefit of up to $847 per week, and it would be in place for a 12-week period from March 15th to June 6th, 2020. As of today, we have announced that the subsidy will be available to employers who have suffered a drop in gross revenues of at least 15%, 15, in March, and 30% in April and May. And employers of all sizes and across all sectors of the economy, with the exception of public sector entities, would be eligible for this. Restaurants, hardware stores, not-for-profit, you name it. If they have been significantly impacted by COVID-19, they could be eligible. And this subsidy would prevent further job losses, encourage employers to rehire workers previously laid off as a result of COVID-19. This is important by keeping their employees. Canadian companies will be in a better position to bounce back quickly after the crisis. We have also introduced the new Canada Emergency Business Account, some call it CEBA, and this program will provide up to $25 billion to eligible financial institutions so that they can provide interest-free, partially forgivable loans of up to $40,000 to small businesses, including non-for-profits. Now, these loans are guaranteed and funded by the Government of Canada and will ensure that small businesses have access to the capital they need at a 0% interest rate to pay for rent and other important costs over the next number of months. Canada's economic response plan to respond to COVID-19 is the largest and most rapidly deployed peacetime investment in Canadian history. We have worked hard to get to this point, but we will continue to do so as long as this persists. We are prepared to do whatever it takes to make sure that Canadians are safe and secure. Nous avons pris ces mesures et d'autres pour aider à protéger les emplois dont dépendent les Canadiens et Canadiennes en ces temps difficiles. Nous avons dit que nous ferons tout ce qu'il faut pour protéger la santé et la sécurité des Canadiens, stabiliser l'économie et atténuer l'impact économique de la pandémie de la COVID-19, et c'est ce que nous faisons. In these unprecedented times, we will continue to carefully monitor all developments related to COVID-19 and work hard to ensure businesses get the support they need. Now that we are creating, developing, adapting, and delivering in record timing as we speak. This type of conversation is part of the process and the development and evolution of those programs. And your ideas and questions are valuable and help mold our approach and responses. I would now be open to your questions. And please note that if I can't answer all of them because we're in a very dynamic situation, I will find the answer and send it to your team, and I will follow up. Thank you again so much for your time. Thank you, Catherine, for your hard work, and to your team. And as we know, these are very difficult times, but we can and we will get through it. And to do that, we need to work together. Thank you. Merci.
Yes, thank you for those sentiments and that information and for being available to us in such a crazy, busy time. Yeah, I'd like to just pick up on a few of those very important pieces of information that you have provided. Uh, could you just talk a little bit about what the federal government's overall objectives? You talked about your themes about safety and not letting anyone fall through the cracks and being there for all Canadians. What does success look like at the end of these programs and this initiative by the federal government?
So I believe that at this time, we have to remind ourselves that we started less than a month ago in this very trying times. And those steps I was explaining earlier, that we focused first on health and safety. That was number one. And we consulted the experts and followed their recommendations on guidelines and measures to prevent the spread and to bring the curve down. And also the second step was to really make sure that no one fell through the cracks, and we increased support for vulnerable populations across the country, and we want to continue to do that. And as a third step, we put economic measures to address the impact on businesses and the economy. Now, with the wage subsidy, which is the last one that we just presented, we are protecting jobs with the response benefit. We're supporting those who lost their jobs. And with the Business Credit Availability Program, the Canada Emergency Business Account, and many other programs and partnerships, we're supporting the businesses and employers who are creating these jobs and contributing to our economy. So the success looks like what we will see in the next few weeks on how we can continue to support everyone through the crisis, and then start looking at what will be the next steps in recovery.
Yeah, so, and I do appreciate how quickly the federal government has tried to respond to this. You know, as you said, record setting amounts of aid, and in a very quick period of time for what is a very large bureaucracy trying to respond to unusual circumstances. But at our end, we're hearing the need from business owners who are increasingly concerned about the timing of aid. And you know, the 75% subsidy for wages is extremely important. But if a few months go by when they have to continue to pay for those wages, when they have zero revenue coming in or very, very low revenue, they're not going to be able to bridge that period of time till they actually receive the wage subsidy. So do you have a timeline for when employers can apply for that subsidy, and when beyond that, when they can expect to actually receive the funding?
Well, thank you for that question. And it is very hard to create and deliver programs in just so quickly. So we are confident that employers will be able to begin to apply late April for the wage subsidy, and will receive the funding on a monthly basis. And also employers will need to reapply for every month of impact for a period of 3 months. So we are trying to make it as easy as possible, but at this time we're looking at late April as a start to be able to go forward with the wage subsidy.
Late April, okay. And do you know,
but I would be, you know, I prefer saying late April at the same time.
So a couple more weeks probably is what we're looking at. And you'd want information about revenue drops in order to qualify. Is there going to be a, what's the gap in time between if someone applies in late April and, as you say, they will receive monthly subsidies, they have to reapply monthly? Do you anticipate, or how much of a time do you anticipate there being in between applying and receiving?
What I understand, it'll be very quick. It won't be like another week or two. It should be pretty much in the next few days. But to make sure that I'm not giving the wrong information, I will reconfirm with you. But the idea was to apply, and then we'll be able to pay quick.
Okay, that would, I think that will give people a better sense of it being a timely program and a timely form of assistance, because, you know, and again, it's all based on previous experience. Often national programs take months between application and receipt. So a few days would be remarkable and much appreciated.
The fact that we're using platforms that we know with the
Yes.
Canada Revenue Agency is why we're confident that we'll be able to move forward quickly. We're not creating a new platform completely, so Canada Revenue Agency will be able to deliver that.
Okay, yes, yeah, that is true. You have been using established channels to do things as quickly as you can. Can we talk about the $40,000 loan with the $10,000 forgivable if people pay it back? I think it was by 2023. That's another timing thing for employers. Rent keeps coming up month after month, and I have another question about rent beyond this, but even the 40K would certainly help bridge that expense over the next couple of months. So do you know when employers will have access to that?
So for the Canadian Emergency Business Account, I have actually good news. The loan program is available as of today.
Okay.
In the majority of the financial institutions. So we know that we are working with the 6 largest banks, but we are also working with credit unions across the country that have been accredited to work with this CEBA program, the Canadian Emergency Business Account. And other credit unions will be receiving the accreditation as we go. So I would, if you're with a credit union, you should check, because most probably you'll be able to work with that credit union. And if you're with a major financial institution, a bank, you will be able to start today to have access to that loan.
Okay, and the banks themselves and credit unions are likely to reach out and contact their customers and say, are you interested, or is it on the customer to go to those financial institutions?
Well, I'm hopeful that they will also reach out, but I would encourage employers who'd like to apply to contact their financial institution either by phone or online to have access to this process of applying for the CEBA program.
Okay, and just to reiterate, it's up to 40,000, and if you do repay it by the date that's provided by the federal government, you do automatically qualify for the $10,000 being forgiven for $10,000 of it.
Yes.
So,
which is an incentive for many of the businesses to be able to do that.
Yeah, and no interest in the meantime is the other benefit of this loan.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have any other additional assistance that the federal government is planning that you can describe today?
So as you know, we're continuing and currently considering additional support to assist Canadians who earn less than the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, the CERB, which is the $2,000 a month. We are also looking at addressing the eligibility of partial income earners who have lost a portion of their revenue. We're looking at that. We are monitoring pretty much every element and are prepared to make the necessary changes or additions when and where appropriate the situation as it evolves. And we really want to do whatever it takes. So I would also encourage people, if they don't fit in and they seem to fall into the cracks, to maybe communicate with you or even with their local MP to really explain why they can't, and we can work and try to find those solutions for the people that won't be able to access to the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. But you will see as we go, we're really trying to find a way to support Canadians depending on their situation.
Okay, along that theme, we hear more for employers than employees, I would say. And, you know, the 40,000 loan is a start, but there's a very strong reluctance to go into debt at a time when you don't have revenue coming in, especially the small. 40,000 is obviously designed to help small businesses because it's more of an impact on a small business than a very large business, $40,000. But those are the same businesses that don't want to incur further debt when they don't have revenue coming in the door. So at some point, we're very much hoping that the federal government is going to talk about recovery type funding, and sooner rather than later, because we want businesses to exist in order to recover. And we're hoping for a grant program, not a debt program, especially for the service industry in our region, which has been particularly hard hit. The tourism, the visitor economy, you can call it, and all of the related businesses hit early with the loss of crews, travel restrictions from the US, government directives to shut down a lot of those businesses. So they're at zero revenue, and they don't need more debt. They need a bailout package, to be blunt. So the Prime Minister has talked about the oil industry and agriculture in his remarks being particularly hard hit and needing particular help to survive. And I think the tourism, speaking for our employers, not personally, I think the tourism industry fits into that category of a very hard hit industry. So is there appetite from the federal government to put together particular grant programs for industries that are hard hit?
I'll start by saying that we know that the tourism industry is hard hit by COVID-19, and we are really working tirelessly to mitigate its impact on the Canadian economy. I know that Minister Joly has been doing a lot of outreach, especially for those businesses in the tourism sector, to try to understand what would be different solutions. But in the meantime, what we've been doing, as I said, as a first step, is to provide immediate help to those Canadians and businesses that are in most need, and including those who are without pay because of COVID-19, whether they're sick, caring for a loved one, unemployed, or sent home. And the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy will cover up to 75% of wages, like I mentioned before, for those businesses that are hardest hit. That's including the tourism and hospitality sector. And already this measure is allowing businesses to rehire, keep staff on as we navigate through this challenge. And we will, of course, continue to monitor the impacts closely. And as we have demonstrated, we will not hesitate to take additional steps if necessary during this pandemic. And as for the recovery or the next steps, we are looking at how we can address the different sectors and, you know, not only, as you mentioned earlier, the oil industry or agriculture, but also and especially the sector of tourism and hospitality. And we are working with our different, you know, cabinet ministers who have those portfolios to try to see what will be best to support that sector. So I would have to say, because of so many unknowns right now, I would have to say stay tuned and be tuned with us so we can work together and see how we can navigate through these really difficult times.
Okay, yes, I know that our tourism representatives have talked to Minister Joly and are in constant discussion back and forth with her. So we will keep our fingers crossed that there will be something coming in particular to help out the tourist industry that's not just debt related. So you did talk about the $40,000 loan being intended, and I know the Prime Minister said this last week, I think it was, in his remarks at some point, that I think it was actually just heading into the end of March when businesses were concerned about paying rent, that after wages, and you know, that's taken care of as much as you're, I think, going to reasonably be able to take care of it with the 75% subsidy. But rent is the next biggest thing for businesses, and that's going to keep coming back, you know, May, June, however long we're in this situation. So is the federal government going to be doing something specific to help small business with rent?
Thank you for that question. And as I would, first start by saying, like now, of course, this is an issue of tenant-landlord relationships, and it generally falls under provincial jurisdiction. But our government wants to support small businesses by providing the financial program they need. And that's why we're working in close collaboration with financial institutions and accredited credit unions to ensure that our programs complement each other in the best interests of Canadian business owners. And our loan programs through the BDC and EDC will also provide support for those businesses facing financial hardships and cash flow issues. And this is a all hands on deck effort, and everyone needs to work together to help weather the storm, and we will continue to collaborate with the provincial jurisdictions to see if there's anything else we can either tweak in the programs we're offering or offer in the next weeks or in the rest of this pandemic situation.
Okay, so you rightly say there's provincial responsibility for landlord-tenant relations, including commercial ones. So I'm assuming you're saying the province has the lead on rent issues, really? Okay.
But we don't want to say that we're not ready to work on this and trying to adapt our programs and maybe find solutions. So that's why I use the expression we're all hands on deck effort as we collaborate a lot with the provinces and even with the municipalities to try to hold on to all those different issues we have to deal with.
Yes, fair enough. So the Prime Minister talked about modeling this morning. We were just having a quick talk about that before we were live here. So do you have any sense of when you are going to be able to start talking about recovery? The two-part question, that one. And then I'm very interested to hear if the federal government considers BC to be in a separate category with regard to recovery based on our experience, our curve, the fact that we are at a much flatter curve, so far so good, in BC compared to Ontario and Quebec.
And well, of course, that is a great question. And a lot of people are starting to talk about what will recovery look like, and one of which we are asking ourselves as well. And what I can tell you right now is because we are in the crisis phase of the outbreak, we have moved on what we've moved thus far. But we heard also today from the Public Health Agency of Canada that the timeline for the pandemic is pretty much fluid and depends across the country, but could carry on for a few months. So we are starting to consider the recovery phase or phases. But currently our main focus at this time is making sure Canadians are healthy, making sure they're safe, and that they are not worried about paying their current bills or putting food on the table. And our behavior as Canadians will also dictate how quickly we will get through the period of uncertainty. And that's why I want to reiterate that everyone should stay home, practice social and physical distancing, wash your hands regularly, and follow the public health officials' measures in your region to make sure that we continue to flatten the curve. And I do want to answer that second part of your question about the reality of BC right now, and congratulations, because you're looking that you're moving better than maybe other parts of the country. But these are realities we're going to have to deal with, and the recovery phase will probably be also thought that way. And the federal government will have to adapt and align our focus depending on how that happens across the country. And the big thing for me and our government is to say that we have to get through this together. So with the provincial, municipal, and with partners like the Greater Victoria Chamber of Commerce, we need to work together to start looking at that recovery space. So I would say we will move forward on it very soon.
Yes, and we have had very good guidance from the provincial government and our provincial officer of health on a daily basis. So I'm assuming that we will continue to rely on that, and they will provide us some guidance on how we behave as a province too, both through this pandemic and through recovery. So we have a few questions from our members, and some of them have been covered very capably in your comments already. So I've got an interesting one about the impact of COVID-19 relief, and whether you are also turning your mind when you design these relief efforts to, does it make individuals and businesses more resilient and prepared for climate change and a climate emergency, which was very much at the forefront of everybody's mind right up till the point where this pandemic seemed to have taken us off all our major agenda items.
Yes. And, and I repeat, I might be repeating myself too much, but our focus right now is on helping Canadians and businesses who have been impacted by COVID-19. And like I said, it's all hands on deck. And even Minister Haidu tells us that regularly and every day. But at the same time, the government has been very clear about our commitment to addressing climate change, including setting a target of net zero emissions by 2050. So we will continue with that. And the relief we've put in place for businesses is broad-based and applying to businesses of all sizes and sectors. So I believe that that is part of making sure that we keep that climate emergency part of our ways to deliver our programs.
Yes, and unintentionally, we've had an experience of much lower transportation emissions from production, and that experience around the world, which I think has been remarkable in some countries. You know, I heard some, this is a bit off script, but I heard some stories about the people in some cities in China seeing blue sky for the first time, and people being able to hear
a little bit more right now.
Yeah, so every downside has an upside or a silver lining, shall we say, to be cliche about this.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, people hearing birds more, people getting outside and walking in distance from other people, and experiencing nature, and a different pace and a different tone to our cities. So that's been an interesting side effect.
Well, we'll have to also, at some point find positives out of this pandemic. And that's one of them. I've been hearing in my community and across Canada how, things have changed on the climate side since we've been staying at home more, and there's less movement out there. So.
Yes. So a couple of quick questions about some of the, when you said, I think this fits into the category of maybe some cracks, that some people might fall into. So you have a criteria of an annual payroll of $50,000 or more to get the $40,000 loan, I believe. So sometimes small business owners invest all of their cash back into their company as they're growing it. That might be a crack, especially for startup businesses. So is there anything you have underway for businesses where salaries are less than $50,000?
Great question, and we understand that the challenges businesses are facing, and we are implementing measures to help them through these difficult times, as I mentioned. And the 75% wage subsidy threshold was reduced to 15% for the month of March, because we want to help employers keep staff on the payroll by alleviating the pressure of maintaining salaries and wages. So that we changed after we announced it. So we moved on that detail. We're also differing the GST and HST payments, income taxes and custom duties, to make it easier to businesses to conduct their operations. We're expanding the EI work sharing program to help keep people on staff, and we continue to adapt as we go to the needs of the business community. And we know that small businesses are the backbone of our economy, and they drive innovation in our communities. And we will have, and we will continue to have, the businesses will have their backs. For the 50,000 threshold, I know that many across the country have raised that threshold as being an issue, and we are looking into it to see if there's something else either that we can offer, or if we can find another way to use that threshold. So stay tuned, but until then, the threshold is set to $50,000 payroll, up to $1 million.
Okay. A similar question with regard to very small companies that are experiencing very tight margins, don't have savings, don't think that they have the ability to take on more debt. I did talk kind of recovery fund and for tourism, but on another angle, if there are small companies that really feel like they can't afford to take on $40,000 debt, are you thinking about any alternative for them?
So I've shared already the measures that we've put out so far, and I understand also that some might want to look at the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit, the CERB, as being a solution, but also we are looking at maybe offering smaller loans. We're really trying to see how we can support these smaller, I'll say, businesses that would not want to go towards the $40,000 liability, like you mentioned earlier. We will continue to look at it. I do invite, again, those that are in that reality to submit your ideas on what you would be looking for, and also in the meantime work with their local financial institutions to see if they also have solutions that could support them in these very difficult times. We are working closely with the major banks, but also with many credit unions to try to find a way to help businesses sustain the reality and also the anxiety right now.
Okay, yeah. We have had lots of people submitting ideas to us, so I'll just encourage anyone who is watching this, if you have a specific idea, absolutely, if you have a problem or an issue, submit those, but also ideas are very welcome. Some of the best ideas that we have received have absolutely come from members, and we'll pass them along to the appropriate recipient government. Okay. Do you know, here's just a general information or data question. Do you know how many businesses have been closed down and how many jobs that represents? And if not now, do you have stats coming on that?
Well, great question. We've seen numbers come out today from StatsCan on the national impact of COVID-19 on the country for the last month, and we know how difficult these job losses are for workers and their families, and we recognize the urgency of the situation we're currently in. It's a time of great uncertainty as we work to contain the spread of the virus and also ensure that we have the tools we need in place in order to keep people and our economy safe. And again, that's why we've implemented these measures. I know that we will see numbers as we go along. I mean, the last month we've seen some, clear demonstration that a lot of job losses and businesses struggling. The fact that we've put measures forward and some businesses are taking that, like for example, the 75% wage subsidy as being a tool for bringing back, rehiring workers, I would not want to entertain giving too many statistics at this time, but I think we'll have to look forward and see how the impact of yes, our decisions, but also the impact of COVID-19 will give us a better sense of numbers in the next few weeks.
Yeah, and as you were speaking, I remembered something that is relevant to this, which is we're members of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and the Canadian Chamber has, with Statistics Canada, designed a survey for all businesses. And we've had it in our last couple of weeks of business news, our business news email to all our members, and very strongly encourage all our members to fill that out, because I think Canadian Chamber is helping Stats Can get the kind of input that they need to have a sense of the impact on business.
And I believe also the BC Chamber of Commerce and or the BC Business Council have also done these surveys to better understand what the situation is in the province. And I've been receiving a lot of that information, and it's so useful for us to have that data so we can better understand the realities across the country. I mean, we won't have the same realities in BC that happens in Nova Scotia or even in Ontario. So the work that the chambers have been doing and your organization is so helpful, and we will use that as the data that will come to us to be able to make better decisions in the design, delivery, and creation of those programs.
Right. So I think we're at the front end of this. We are actually asking businesses to say what the impact is on them, because nobody really has that full picture yet. So all businesses, please contribute. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I cut you off there.
No, it's really important that businesses feel that they can share that information. That's how we will, your organization and even government, be able to say, okay, that's what we need. This is the temperature that we have in our different regions.
Absolutely. Okay, I've got a bit of an unusual question as my final question, which is, what about one of the impacts of the COVID-19 national emergency on our economy is the impact on exports. And is this now the time to use this opportunity to dismantle interprovincial trade barriers so that we can maximize the opportunity as we come out of this for trade among Canadian provinces?
That's a loaded question. And I will thank you for that question, because honestly, I would not want to answer it right now, but I would like to do a bit of homework to see if there is something that we could do about it. And I believe it's a question that we should all ask ourselves. Yeah. Can better work together across the country, and how provinces and the federal government will, bring the shoulders together and make sure that we put all hands on deck and see how we can better coordinate, business across the country. One thing that it makes me think of, though, is the Minister of Industry Innovation, Minister Baines, has been focusing on a Made in Canada economic strategy to try to make sure that we have the businesses to produce what we need on the health side, ventilators,
yes.
masks. So I think that it's such a great question, and it would also help to see how our Made in Canada strategy can be better, coordinated. And I think that this might be a good question to also ask your members on, what they think we should be doing, and feel that that idea of how we can better coordinate across the country.
Yes, well, the provincial governments and the federal government have been in this conversation for decades about maximizing trade among themselves and getting rid of these interprovincial trade barriers. So I think this fits in the category of never waste a good crisis, which is take advantage of everyone's attention on these things right now and use it to improve some things in our country that can be improved and that we've been kind of stymied on or delayed on for a very long time. So that, and yes, a Made in Canada economic strategy. I think we would like to see a encouragement for Canadians to visit Canada once it's safe to do that. We may not have the same volume of visitors from the US, but we would be very pleased in Victoria to see as many Canadians as possible once it's safe to travel, come here and use
Well, it's
our
on
own.
my list to go back to Victoria with my family. So you can bet that that's on my wish list right now, or bucket list.
Excellent. Welcome. As soon as as soon as it's safe, we are very happy to welcome you back.
And if I may maybe add, because I know I've been talking a lot about businesses, and I just want to also, many businesses, of course, they have families, and I just haven't had the chance to mention maybe a couple of other great measures that will be helping families, where we'll be implementing an increase to the Canada Child Benefit of up to $300 per child that will benefit across the country 3.5 million families. So in Victoria, I'm sure that many of those families will have access to that up to $300 per child. And also for those that are students, we're pausing student loans, which will save the average young person $160 a month for 6 months. And we're also extending the tax filing deadline to June 1st, and it will allow Canadians to defer any payments owing until August 31st. And for seniors, for the RIFs, we've introduced a 25% reduction to try to help weather that RIF. So we're also trying to address different parts of our community.
Yes, and yesterday I think it was, there was the announcement about the 100% subsidy for the student summer job program, which is a very popular program. I'm going to put in a pitch for, right now it's 70,000 students or young people, it's people under the age of 30 of working age who can have their 100% salary subsidy, or their salary subsidized. Could it be bigger? We can use more of those people, and 70,000 is the usual number. So at this point, I think there will be a bigger appetite. So I would just put in a pitch for more students able to take advantage of that subsidy.
Well, thank you for that pitch, and I will take that back for sure. One thing I'd like to explain though, so you remember this Canada Summer Jobs Program used to be during the summer, and
Yes.
we've found also that our youth will be able to work part-time, and we will go up to next February as stretching out the program to be much more flexible. So that is another really important measure. And yes, right now it's 70,000 jobs. We're looking also at what or how are we going to be able to help students, which is a group that we really need to find more solutions, and we're working on it. And that might be part of an idea to increase the numbers.
Okay. On that note, thank you very much for your time, Minister Fortier, and all of the information and being available at this time when, as you have mentioned, it's very, very intense for anyone in your position, many of us, but particularly the federal government with what it's faced with. And we appreciate your contribution, your information, and we look forward to welcoming you back in Victoria as soon as possible.
Well, thank you, and good health, and hopefully we'll be going through and weather this storm very fast so we can all together bring back our economy to one that we'll all be able to contribute. Thank you so much for the invitation, and we will see each other again very soon, I hope.
Yes, thank you.
Merci.